Good evening, everyone.
Good
For
evening.
those of you who don't know me, my name is Gary Mond. I'm the chairman of the National Jewish Assembly. We're really honoured tonight to have Allison Pearson as our guest speaker. But before I introduce Allison, I've just got a short announcement to make. About an hour ago, I received a telephone call from Sarah Dines. Sarah Dines is the Home Office Minister under Suella Braverman, who's responsible for safeguarding and hate speech. And she told me that the government is doing what it can to support the Jewish community. And although the police will have the final decision or in charge of the operational side of things, regard to the horrendous march that's being planned for Armistice Day on Saturday, they're doing their best to try to see what they can do to change the situation. And Sarah Dines asked me to convey this to you all. And I just hope and pray that the march on Saturday does not happen. Okay, so now let me introduce Allison. It's a great honour to have such a leading figure from the world of media and the newspapers and indeed TV and radio speaking to us tonight. Allison's background has been in journalism. She's written for about 4 or 5 different newspapers, including the Daily Mail, the Independent, the Financial Times, the Evening Standard, and most prominently now these days the Telegraph. She's also presented programs on Channel 4 and BBC Radio 4. She's also famous for having written a book. I don't know how she does it, which is about mothers having to cope with difficult situations. And she's well known for her views on a wide range of issues, such as Brexit, the COVID-19, Islamic fundamentalism, and the transgender issues. So without further ado, I'm introducing Allison. I'm going to ask Allison a series of questions, which she'll answer at length, and then I will throw it open to everyone to ask questions of themselves. So I'd just like to start, Allison, by asking you, what has motivated you to form the British Friends of Israel group and make the October Declaration?
Well, I was going to say it's lovely to be here, Gary, but obviously we're here because of very tragic circumstances. And I just want to say to everyone how sorry I am. And there are a number of us who are trying to do our best in whatever way we can to be helpful to all you guys. So Gary, it was the 16th of October, and my friend Laura Dodsworth, who is a very successful writer, she wrote a book called A State of Fear. She's a campaigner. And Laura texted me, and I think we've been texting back and forth saying, obviously after the atrocities of the 7th of October, we were feeling absolutely shattered and horrified by this, not just this blow to Israel, but what we saw as a blow to the civilized world. And Laura said, shall we do something? So that was on the 16th of October. And I think we were already aware that Israel's kind of given a free pass for about 3 days, isn't it, when something bad's happened to Jews. And then the media story starts to revert to the normal Palestinians, victims, Israel, aggressors. So we were very offended by that. And a small group of us started to come together to compose this October Declaration. So it was Laura Dodsworth, Toby Young, who people will know is the chairman of the Free Speech Association, and Toby's also a distinguished Spectator columnist and writer. Another Toby Guys, came on to do PR and media, Emma Webb, a young broadcaster, Francis Hoare, a barrister, and Ian Rons, who was absolutely brilliant and did all the technical stuff. So we did it in about 4 or 5 days, and I have to say, it was completely crazy, but we set out to get about 200, 300 prominent names that we could post. And Laura was drawing up the declaration. And what did we think? We thought that we would set up a British Friends of Israel group, and it would be mainly the right of Jewish people, particularly in our country, our mutual country, to be safe, to condemn the attacks unconditionally of 7th of October, support the right of Israel to defend herself, to deplore anti-Semitism in any form, and to demand that the media called Hamas terrorists. So I think our first purpose was to publicly show support for British Jews and for Israel as a counterpoint to what we were seeing as already some very unbalanced reporting.
Thank you. I just wanted to expand a little bit on the whole issue of media bias. We, the Jewish community, have been horrified at the failure of the BBC and indeed other organisations to actually call Hamas what they are, terrorists. They are prescribed as a terrorist organisation by the government. We can't really get to the bottom of why there is this failure to call the Hamas terrorists. It is actually unbelievable. I sometimes some people say, well, it's because the BBC staff are actually frightened, or is there more to that? What do you think?
Well, it's complicated, isn't it? Because clearly Hamas is a prescribed terrorist organization in Britain. So they are illegal here. So it is a bit mystifying. I suspect it's because certain journalists are going into the conflict zones, and they probably, the BBC, Channel 4, they maybe think that they are putting their reporters at risk. I'm not really sure, but I do know, won't come as any surprise to any of you to know that there is a clear fashionable leftist bias, which is pretty much anti-Israel, and that manifests itself the whole time. I'm sure I'm not the only one screeching at the television when certain things get left out, or we can talk a bit more later about the propaganda, but it's very, I would say where we are at the moment is that Israel is winning the ground war and losing the propaganda war. And it's amazing how good Hamas and presumably Iran are at winning hearts and minds. And we've seen that on our streets, haven't we? And it's really devastating, but it's just a fact. And for every statement that's put out by Israel saying, look what happened to us, they started it, you'll have some more footage of children in Gaza being pulled out of a building. So it's a very, very tough one. But we are calling in the October Declaration for the BBC to very much call Hamas terrorists, although recently they've slightly amended it, haven't they? They now say described as a terrorist organization by the UK and US, among other countries. So that is there. But it's very weird, because I don't remember them not calling Al-Qaeda terrorists, or not ISIS terrorists. And equally, I don't remember when the Western allies were going into Mosul and Raqqa to root out Islamic State. I don't remember them saying, let's have a nice ceasefire. Does anyone remember that? No. So there's this clear bias that Israel was allowed to be, we were allowed to feel sorry for Israel for about a week, and then it really kicked in. So that's just, that's just the way it is. I think I do think there've been some successes. I mean, I think that, I think I was in the hairdresser this morning, and the hairdresser had picked up some of the stuff that had been done to children and babies. I think that has made an impression. I think I would agree. I see my job as just absolutely banging on about it the whole time. Never forget what the motive force was. But when we got the signatures for the declaration, we're very lucky very early on that Andrew Neil, lots of leading historians came on board. So Tom Stoppard, which was brilliant. And Tom helped us to draft the October Declaration. And Tom added a line into the declaration where he said that Hamas knew there would be consequences, but Hamas reckoned them not. And that's the point, isn't it? The point is that to do something so vile, they knew there would be huge consequences, and they didn't care that the people of Gaza would pay with their lives for their actions, really. And my job, I think, is to keep saying that there are these different groups. There are the terrorists, and then there are the ordinary civilians. Now, we could argue about how much support there is amongst Palestinians for Hamas, but certainly, I don't know if anyone saw the other day, a couple of days ago, there was a poor lady in the street in Gaza whose son had been killed, and she was screaming against Hamas. She was saying, yes. You have brought this upon us. Yeah. And I thought that was interesting, that they obviously tried to bundle her away. But there must be people like that who think, what the hell have these people done to us? So I think that really emphasizing the whole time that the terrorists are different from the civilians. Sorry.
Okay. All right. I was going to just move on with the media. What is the chances, really, of you being able to win the media war? We've got BBC and Sky on one hand, but you seem to have quite a fair bit of support from other journalists and others who feel the same way. Do you feel that the battle in the media in the UK is one that can be won over the coming months?
Not in the broadcast media. I mean, the Telegraph is obviously very strongly pro-Israel. There's some, obviously at the Times, you've got Daniel Finkelstein and Juliet Samuel. Although I would say the Times is blowing a bit hot and cold. The Mail, I think, is very on board. I've noticed the Sun, actually.
I was about to say the Sun, yes.
The Sun is really rowing in now, and the Sun had a very powerful front page a couple of days ago, which had the 32 children and babies who were held hostage, and then today it had a show some respect, cancel the Armistice Day million march. So it's powerful to have the tabloids and at least one of the broadsheets. I don't think we're ever going to make much headway with the BBC. I don't know. I think if they know they're being watched. I don't know if anyone noticed this the other day, that a few days ago Jeremy Bowen did a report, and the report featured this guy. I think it was emerging from a sort of burning building, and this guy is a crisis actor for Hamas, and he's cropped up in many scenarios. He's been wounded. He's been a grieving father. He's literally, I think he's been a dead body. So, somebody online on Twitter pointed out that the guy the BBC was featuring in its report is just a complete fake. So they very rapidly downgraded that. So I think the more pressure that all of us, if you see anything that you think is wrong, do make a complaint, because it's just, you might think it's futile, but it's actually good to keep saying, you're running this stuff, or it's biased, or where was the other side? I think you've noticed, Gary, that they're notably more aggressive to the Israeli spokespeople. They've had a couple of Hamas.
Oh yes.
There's one Hamas guy on Radio 4 who's basically saying they hadn't killed any civilians. I mean, it was just excruciating, But and that lovely guy who I think used to be the the Israeli ambassador to the UK, Mark Regev.
Mark Regev, yes, you know him well.
Such a calm, decent person, and he's just has to put up with this absolute, well, I won't use the word, but the crap he has to put up with is really astonishing, and he deals with it very, very well.
Just want to ask you a question about the Israeli approach to the media. One of the things that we in the Jewish community have known for many years is, sadly, Israel is not very good at its own PR. Bibi Netanyahu, who is a controversial figure even in the Jewish community, in my opinion, has spoken really, really well and been very, very clear about Israel's objectives. But in your opinion, as a journalist, are there other things Israel, be it the Prime Minister or others in Israel, should do that they're not doing that could help their cause?
Well, it's difficult, isn't it? Because I sympathise with their perspective. I mean, I think they are rightfully absolutely incandescent and furious, and I can see why it would be hard to pretend otherwise. Why should they be making nice noises? Why, when the wound that the country's been dealt is just intolerable, isn't it? And I wrote in my column the other week that if 2,000 terrorists had come to the UK and shot dead 250 people in a field at Glastonbury and gone and wrought havoc, going around beheading people in the United Kingdom, our country wouldn't be sitting there saying, "Oh, let's have a ceasefire," would it? No country, no self-respecting country could suffer that kind of attack. I did see, I don't know, who is it? Is he former Prime Minister? Is he called Naftali Bennett?
Yes, he's former Prime Minister.
Yes, who was in conversation with Victoria Derbyshire. I think it was on Newsnight. And I mean, she wasn't left standing, really. He was absolutely in the nicest possible way. He told her she hadn't got a clue that Israel would be doing what Israel was going to do, and for her to try and take the moral high ground was completely absurd. So it's a battle for the moral high ground. It's a battle for hearts and minds, and I'm not sure that Israel can win it, given the institutional anti-Semitism we see, and we've just seen it in the Metropolitan Police, even, which is disgusting. But Gary, I take the view the Jews are phenomenally strong people. Israel is an amazing country, and will do as she sees fit. That's what I think, and I think just go on doing, they are trying to spare casualties. Yeah. I know they are. And no other country would be making any better efforts in a war, would they?
Yeah. I've got a couple more questions, but can I just urge people to put your virtual hands up? You'll see in the Zoom at the bottom, there's a button you can click which says raise hand. 3 people have raised their hands, 4 people have raised their hands so far. Feel free to raise your hands and I'll be calling you shortly, but I've just got 1 or 2 more questions of my own. The first one is, what do you think? You've done a fantastic job, you and your colleagues, in setting up British Friends of Israel. Where can it go from here? And I can assure you the National Jewish Assembly would be delighted to help you in any way we can. But I just want to know what you think the future holds for such a new group, which has got such amazing potential, bearing in mind who the people who are supporting it are.
Yeah, well, with my, I was saying to Gary beforehand, before we started, that my Jewish friends say that I'm an honorary Jew. So as an honorary Jewish mother, I'm delighted that our October Declaration got so many signatures from doctors and lawyers, because as we know, all Jewish mothers like to have doctors and lawyers. So we've got 75,000 actually verified signatures. We ran into some issues early on because we had some cyber attacks which were coming from Middle East addresses. I don't really understand all the technical side. We had LinkedIn ban us for something called malware. Don't know what that was, but anyway, so we've had some teething troubles, but I think we'll easily get to 100,000, and I think there's some very, very eminent, extremely eminent people on that list. So I think what we hope to do is just use that database we have, and talking about liaising with other groups for vigils, backing each other up with media articles, social media. I've been retweeting things. I've now got stuff from the Israeli embassy coming in, and despite what you say, Gary, they are trying. So they are trying to.
Oh, I'm sure.
They are trying to send material every day with proper announcements and things like that. So I think it's just what we hope to do is to keep the pressure on the other media to describe these dreadful people in the correct terms, but also to keep drawing the distinction. And I think that my strong sense now with the marches, this march, if it goes ahead on Saturday, will be the 5th march. I've written for my column, which goes out on Wednesday. I was writing it earlier, and I said that the famous British tolerance now is being stretched to really breaking point. And I think there's huge unease and dislike in the country. And we saw, I don't know if everybody saw the photograph of 3 Royal British Legion volunteers at Charing Cross trying to sell poppies. And yes. They were surrounded by these, and they were older people, very recognizably British types, doing a decent thing, selling poppies for their country, and just surrounded by these hordes of intimidating people. So I think stuff like that is cutting through. I think there will be, I don't know. I'm going down to London on Saturday to stand next to Churchill's statue with some friends. I'm hearing from other people saying they're going to go. So the silent people of England will, I think, I think Chesterton said about the sleeping people of England, they will one day wake. And I think we are getting to that now, because we're not going to have this. And in the run up to Christmas, who wants to go shopping and a show in the West End, which many of us do, enjoying the festive season? It's an intimidating environment. We've all seen those pictures of these protesters on tubes singing their terrible chants and slogans. God knows how a Jewish person would feel on there. Nobody would feel happy on one of those tubes. It's disgraceful. And I think we want to see the police now just behaving, in a tougher manner, as we've seen in the continent.
Okay. I'm going to move on to questions now, as there are already 11 hands up, so I want to get as many in as I can. Please, can I ask each person to ask a question, not to make a speech? Just, ask your question. Alison will answer it, then move on to the next question. Benjamin Tampa, I see you first, and then I saw David Lazarus second. So Benjamin, please come off mute. Hello?
Look, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, I think my main question is, how did we get to this far? After Second World War, we saw the idea of Jewish people going back home and living in a safe land where they finally belong, where everybody in the world knew that Europeans knew the Jews were from Israel. In Africa, we've known it for years, before the First World War, the Second World War, that these people were scattered from their homelands. Now, from Second World War, the 1940s.
Yeah, could we have a question, please, Benjamin, rather than a speech?
When did it come to a form where, as if Jewish are not being used like a commodity, where we sell their anger, we sell their sorrow and suffering, like we're looking at now? How did we come to this? That's my question. How did we? It's like a negligence. Can somebody explain to me how we end up like this?
Okay, Alison.
Do you mean, Benjamin, how have you lost the kind of moral capital after the Second World War? Is that what you mean?
The whole world, including the West, our ancestors, like my grandfather, were so happy that they were saved from the gas chambers of Europe. They are now finally going home. The story about the Jews have been scattered is no more a story. They are finally home. How did we left from that, my grandmother, my grandfather's story?
Yeah, okay, Benjamin. I think we've got the question. Alison, would you like to answer?
It's a very good question, an incredibly deep question. I think we'd need Simon Sharma on here to answer it, really. I think that I've written a piece which is for my Telegraph column on Wednesday, and I said, imagine saying to the fallen at the cenotaph, you gave your lives to defeat fascism, to defeat genocidal, Jew-hating Nazis, and now Remembrance Day may be disrupted by genocidal, Jew-hating, Nazis, effectively. So it does seem to have that the historic parallels are very unfortunate. I'm not sure what the answer is. I do think it's interesting that in the Second World War, anti-Semitism in our country was...
No, it's all right, you can do it.
Okay. All right.
Anti-Semitism was the preserve of the right and the aristocrats, wasn't it? And it has now morphed into the left. It's in our universities, and it's just, it's got a hold via another way. I mean, we thought, didn't we, after Corbyn went, it was a great sigh of relief.
Hello? Sorry, is it? I can hear. Has something gone wrong? Alison, are you okay?
I'm fine.
Yeah, fine. Have you finished? David Lazarus, you're next.
Good evening. Thank you, Alison. Question to you. Interestingly, tonight, are you aware that many Druze Arabic soldiers have perished in this war fighting for Israel? Today, there was a bounty from actually a Bedouin because they lost one of their people in the kibbutz. Would it not have any beneficial effect if we could kind of highlight it's not just Israel, it's not just the Jews that's fighting this war, but there's Druze who are very loyal soldiers and that always have been, that are fighting on behalf of Israel and the state that they call their country as well.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very good point. I mean, I did read one of the many poignant stories was that one of those guys had been incredibly brave at one of the kibbutzes and was Arab himself. I think that's a potentially very good line to take. And also the fact that Israel had been permitting prior to this a lot of workers, hadn't they, to come from Gaza, so and to do very well and to be making a good living. So now that their life chances are blighted, aren't they, by this aggression? But I think it is interesting. Do you also think it's interesting that some of the Arab countries have been quite careful in what they've said? So there was quite a senior guy in Saudi Arabia where they had been going to have an accord with Israel, and this guy, I think he's number 2 or number 3, and he basically said that they didn't approve of what had gone on at all. Now that was so. I don't think there's a complete unanimity amongst the Arab countries about this at all.
We just need to mention Egypt. They don't want to let people over the border. That's enough, no?
No, they do not. No.
So there's a question there, but it's a bit inflammatory. I get it. You've got to be very careful. What's it like? Can I ask one other question?
Yeah, very
When you're
quickly,
writing
David.
when you're writing a piece, how much do you have to think about your audience that are going to be reading it, that could be very to the left, very to the right, very to the middle? How much impact does that have on your writing?
I think I rely on Telegraph readers to be pretty much bang on where I am. And I have thousands of comments, and of course you get the odd person going on about Israel's genocide, but almost all are kind of with us, I would say. So it's a very reliable, I would say it's a very pro-Israeli, pro-Jewish audience, the Telegraph.
Definitely. Right. Next speaker is Carl Cohen. After Carl, I will call Les Bloom. Those of you who are put in to speak but haven't got your cameras on, I'd be grateful if you could turn your cameras on when you, at least before you speak. Carl.
Hi, good evening, Alison. Good evening, Gary. And I know Gary dreads my interventions because I'm notorious unable to ask questions. So I will make a mini statement with a question mark at the end. It's stating facts. You are one of the very few, selected few, who demonstrate their humanity. I could use the Hebrew expression Hasidei Olam, righteous among nations. We admire very much. You may blush, but we won't see it. You are one of the very few distinguished people who are totally devoted, dedicated to Israel. I'll put a question mark in a minute. It's you are.
Can you please ask your question quickly, Carl, because there's others who want to ask.
Sure.
I'm getting praise, Gary. Don't stop him.
Alison or Miss Pearson, are you aware that you are one of the people who throughout history were described as those whose behavior and attitude towards the Jews indicated their barometer of their DNA and moral fiber? Do you understand? Do you recognize this?
Okay, Carl, thank you. Alison.
Well, I think there are quite a few of us, and the group I mentioned, the fellow founders of the British Friends of Israel, we are not Jews. So those of us that, we're all journalists and campaigners, and we certainly just have an affiliation. I think we're just hopefully just as the Israeli ambassador said to me, this isn't just Israel versus Hamas. This is the civilized world against barbarism, and I do think that. But Carl, to speak to what you said, when my children were small, our neighbours and beloved friends were and are Jews, and my kids grew up with them. And my son, when he must have been about 9 or 10, came home from school, Tom, and he had obviously been doing the Second World War at school. And he said to me, "Mummy, would they have killed Izzy and Maddie?" And I said, "Yes, they would." And then he said, "But we would have hidden them, Mum, wouldn't we?" And that was such a powerful moment. And I thought, who knows what the answer is, really? You don't know, but you this is me hiding them. That's what I'm doing. I'm just.
Thanks, Alison. Right, Les Bloom is next, and after Les Bloom, I'm going to call David Axe. Les. Could you come off mute, please, Les? Thank you.
Okay, unmute. Yeah, I have to agree with the last speaker a little bit, the last questioner. Why we have to ask questions, I don't know. I mean, it's a Zoom meeting, and that's what Zoom meetings are all about. So I take issue a little bit, Gary, that, you know, why can't we make a statement? I mean, anyway, my question to Alison is that one of the things that's being bandied around now is where they refer to Israel as an apartheid state, okay, which is ironic because most of the people throwing that allegation around are of Pakistani heritage, in my experience. Not saying they all, but I think most of them are. And the irony is that Pakistan, just slightly before the Jewish state was formed, expelled just about all the Christians, all the Hindus, whoever. Well, there was a few Jews; they got expelled, you know, and Buddhists, you know. So, and you can check this on Wikipedia or anywhere else you want. Pakistan is ethnically just about pure, in inverted commas, and mono-religious. So I just wonder what you think about this allegation of being an apartheid state was? Question mark.
Thank you, Alison.
Is it not the case at the moment that Pakistan is just expelling about 1 million Afghans, so they're repatriating them so they can talk? Look, double standards abound, don't they? We know that, and I think Israel is in a unique position because being hedged in on all sides by, in some cases, countries full of people who want to kill you, puts you in a uniquely difficult situation. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I think that in this country we had my hair done today by a Turkish Muslim. I go to Turkey all the time. The Muslims I know who are friends are absolutely opposed to what they refer to as the Arab mentality, by which they mean the more sort of fundamentalist mentality, which has infected some mosques in our country. I think people from Saudi preaching sort of blood-curdling sermons. I actually think that there are many Muslims, contrary to what we see on these marches. I'm sure there are many Muslims in this country who just don't want to be tagged with those kind of people. I think you're seeing an unholy alliance of extreme Islamist people and the left, and I think that's what it is. And I do think there are vast numbers of and you're right that to say that some of this comes from Pakistan. It also comes from Saudi, but we have to remember that not all the Muslims in this country feel at all happy with having. In fact, I've had emails from readers who've said, I am blah blah, I'm a Muslim or I'm Palestinian, and they said, I don't want my family to be associated with these crazy people. So that's another aspect, isn't it? We mustn't lose our humanity and assume that, and there's a great worry, I think, among people with brown skin that they will, if we have any violence coming out, that they will be branded, with the same kind of brush, which is concerning.
Thank you. David Axe and then Joanna Rees. So Joanna, if you can turn your camera on, that would be nice. David.
So hi, Alison. Hi. So I don't think you can be thanked enough for what you and Laura and the others have done in creating the October Declaration. So I'll stop testifying now and ask my question. So Alison, what can non-Jews like myself do to show our solidarity with Israelis and with British Jews at such a difficult time? So obviously we've got the October Declaration. I think that's been an invaluable resource in that respect. But one of the things that makes me ashamed to be British at the moment is I been on the vigils and the rally in Trafalgar Square, and they've been very important, very moving events. But there are so few non-Jewish Britons on them. So I think the October Declaration has done so much to kind of challenge the myths and raise awareness. Some of my friends and myself have set up a website, and I've popped that into the chat. So thanks for thanks for the opportunity to publicise it. What can we do? What more should we be doing? I suppose is the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think I think at the moment we're talking about safety, aren't we? I mean, do Jewish people, I don't know, you guys are all on here. I mean, how safe would you feel going into central London, for example? What's the answer? No one, you wouldn't go. No. So that's, for me, that's a huge issue for me. We shouldn't have, in our country, no one should be scared to go into their capital city. No one. So I think it's hard, David, but I think, we all do whatever we can. I mean, with the British Friends of Israel, I think we're going to try and join forces with people like Gary and you guys, do events, keep pushing home. I don't feel pessimistic about the bulk of the country. I think once again we're seeing a very, very aggressive minority colonizing the debate. My worry is that, when people like me go down on Saturday to stand protecting our monuments against this, pro-Palestine march, as you said, Gary, if anything kicks off, no doubt I'll be arrested as a far-right sympathizer.
That'd be fun.
Literally being British now and a proud patriotic Britain. So I see my job as saying the Jewish community is a model of integration, isn't it?
I think so, yes.
Retaining traditions, retaining much that's valuable and contributing hugely to society and charity and business and so on. So I think for me, it's just emphasizing, in comparison with, some of the people we see on those demonstrations, like the ones who were frightening the Royal British Legion, poppy sellers, the Jewish protest in Trafalgar Square, and the other one by Westminster. They were models of respect and just very, very moving. So I think just to keep on keeping on. And I have to say, I couldn't love my country if I didn't think that the vast majority of people were with the British Jews. I think they are. I think they're perhaps slow, perhaps intimidated, as with many issues, to speak out. But I think if you were to, get people into conversation, they would be saying, absolutely, we, model citizens and so on. So I think it's all about that, really. I think it's just.
Thank you, Joanna Rees, and then Keith Rowe. Joanna.
Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry. Thank you, Alison, so much. On your topic of fear, I'm a doctor. And I was speaking to a Jewish patient, and she had a colonoscopy without sedation because she was so frightened because she didn't know who the doctors and nurses are. And a big problem that I'm coming across are students, like dental students, medical students. There is a cesspit of hate and intimidation and bullying going on our university campuses, which needs to be stopped. And also there is a Facebook group called PMG UK, and it's meant to be for female doctors, to come together in unity, and they like chat about things and talk about medicine. And again, it has become a cesspit of lies. And I think my question to you is, we are fighting a war against lies. This is from Pharaoh to Hitler to Hamas. They spread lies. They say whatever they're doing, they're saying that we're doing. So they cause a genocide on our people, and now they go around saying their people are having a genocide. They cut a baby out of a pregnant woman's tummy, and now they're going around saying, oh, there's no anesthetic agents, and they're having to do cesareans without anesthetics. And it's just the onslaught, the tsunami of hate and of lies that we can't counter because there's so much of it, and there's so many people who just want to suck up these lies. And it's like the times when the blood libels of yesterday, where you know, people said that they used Christian children, to the blood of the children to make matzahs. Okay, and like, you think, who would even think that's a real thing? You know, this is just rubbish.
Can we let Alison answer it now?
Sorry.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Thank you.
Sorry,
I do agree completely with your point, Alison.
I know, John. I feel your frustration and your rage, because it is enraging. It is enraging, the things they're saying, and you think, look at what you've done. Look at what you've done. How can you possibly try to claim the moral high ground? But they do. I look, in the end, Islamic State, Al Qaeda, whatever you call them, they overstepped, didn't they? They overstepped. So I think that. Don't think that these crimes that we've heard a lot about, you know, these absolute appalling, you know, betrayals of any human decency that happened in Israel. I think one reason they're trying to take down the posters of the hostages is because it's incredibly embarrassing, isn't it? So they're trying to say, oh, our side's on the side of freedom, but they've got 32 children and babies in captivity. So that doesn't look good, does it? So I think that is one reason they're scraping down the posters. So I think it's just as you say, and with doctors as well, and like with the woman Metropolitan Police officer, some, you know, quite senior position, who was posting something on LinkedIn about you know, anybody who supported Israel was sort of, you know, was genocide or should be criminalized. This is in our country. You know, I don't know, John. I think we have to just think that although good has so many enemies, that it's keep stating the truth. You know, we have to keep saying that's not true, you know. And
Alison, the next thing that will happen, you saw the lynch mob in Dagestan looking for Jews to kill. There was a nurse who posted Heathrow next. And I'm sorry, that is just, we're at the tipping point where words lead to violence. And, you know, lies lead to hate leads to anger leads to violence. And we're a breadth away.
Alison.
I don't have, I'm not, you know, I haven't got the wisdom of Solomon. I don't know what the answer is to these things. I mean, it is absolutely horrible to be living through and to be seeing things twisted. I'm infuriated most days when I watch the TV, as I'm sure you guys are, or I read things about, did you see that guy who was basically a Hamas guy who had been advising the Metropolitan Police on the language that the protesters were using? I mean, but he's being sacked, or he's being disciplined. I'm going after the other woman tomorrow, or in the column. It's just, you know, pick them off one at a time. It's very, very difficult. It just has to be a battle now. And I think I keep saying this, but I'm absolutely convinced that the public is with us, and, you know, this too shall pass. It will. You've been through worse. You've been through a lot worse. You know, this is bad, but it's not, you know, you're not in Poland in 1941. You know, we've still got.
Feels like Germany.
Sorry, Joan. We've got to let others in now. Can I ask? Sorry, Alison. Yes, carry on, Alison.
No, I'm just saying, it may feel like that. It isn't. It is not like that. It is not like that.
Right, next speaker is Keith Rowe, who's Vice Chairman of the National Jewish Assembly, and then Lois Perry. Keith Rowe.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, Alison. Thank you for all that you've done so far with the October Declaration, and also setting up the British Friends of Israel, which has managed to achieve a great deal of support. Now, as well as being Vice Chairman of the NJA, I'm also on the committee for the West Midlands Friends of Israel. And I wondered if you're aware that there is actually already a network of Friends of Israel up and down the country, and they could do with some support, and you could perhaps do with some more support. Yes. And I'm wondering if you've got it in your plans to actually link in with the existing Friends of Israel network to try and expand everybody's activities and gain strength in numbers.
Well, we haven't, but we are. That was on our list of things today to do, that we want to, you know, we want to support and draw in as many as many different people as we can. So I know that there was a Conservative Friends of Israel, which is in Parliament, and we've had a number of those joining and obviously signing the declaration. But it would be brilliant if somehow you could be in touch with me, if Gary passes on. If anyone wants my details, to email about anything where we can make a constructive, work together on anything. We're very keen on using our network such as it is now to enhance anybody else's. Anyone you can get to sign the declaration. I hope we will get to 100,000 quite quickly. As I said, we are verifying them. So lots of these big change.org things, they're not verified. This is us individually verifying everyone.
Excellent.
If we'd allowed all the Mickey Mouses through, we'd have a lot more by now. But
if Gary
Okay.
could put you in touch with me, I'll be happy to make introductions and discuss other things.
Yeah, that would be great.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so next is Lois Perry, and then I'm going to ask Georgie Tan to ask a question. Georgie, if possible, could you put your camera on? That really would be good. Lois.
I can see Georgie.
I can see Georgie now too. Lois.
Hi, Alison. How are you?
Hi, Lois. We saw each other only a few nights ago.
I know. Wasn't that a good night? Apologies for my raucous speech. But anyway, first of all, I'd like to thank you for having me as one of the original signatories on your wonderful October Declaration. It was a real honour. And I'd like to offer my services, if you want me, on Saturday at the Winston Churchill thing. But I wanted to say there was a couple of parts to my question. How much do you think Sky is compromised, Sky News, because they are in many ways as bad as the BBC by the fact that they are sponsored and receive phenomenal advertising from Qatar, who we know are one of the main funders of of Hamas and ISIS and all of that kind of stuff?
Well, I only found out about that a few days ago, but yes, clearly. I actually picked out the other day that their presenter Anna Botting, who was absolutely hysterical in Israel against some person. I've never seen anyone so wildly biased. I mean, these channels, they are losing viewers.
Yeah.
And I do wonder whether people are clicking that what they're seeing is not truthful. I don't know. It's hard, isn't it? Because I think in the BBC, a friend works there, and she's been very upset because, of course, some of her Jewish colleagues and people like her who are pro-Israel, they're in a small minority. As I said, I just think Israel will prevail. I just have a fundamental belief in the strength of the people, and the history and people they're up against. We have to think that good will triumph over evil. We have to, don't we? Because
I agree with you. I'm just wondering as well, with young people, like the young sort of white woke ignoramuses who are on these marches, how much of it is actual anti-Semitism or just misplaced anti-colonialism and anti-capitalism that they've put in the same sort of bag as anti-Semitism? Because some of these kids, they wouldn't, if you said talk to them about the Jewish people or anti-Semitism, they wouldn't have a clue. They just see everything as oppressors and victims, and so they've lumped everything in together. I don't know. What do you think?
I think there's a kind of backpack of fashionable opinions, of which anti-Israel happens to be one of them, and they've asked several of them, haven't they? What river are you talking about from the river?
No.
They haven't got a clue what it is. So I don't
know what the sea is either.
I don't think some of it. Somebody said on Twitter, I think it was Dan Hodges, the very good political correspondent, said that Rishi Sunak said that British kids needed maths lessons up to the age of 18. He said, judging by the last few weeks, they need history lessons up to the age of 18, which I would agree. I think it's I think more worrying is that obviously the universities are full of this stuff, aren't they? We've seen UCL and lots of these places. I mean, every institution. Don't get me started on the United Nations. I mean, what a rat's nest of horrible people they are. God, I
Oh,
mean,
yes.
shock-
Okay.
sorry.
Thank you.
Georgie Tarn and then Helen Stengel. Georgie. You're on mute, Georgie.
Hello. Hi.
Hi, Georgie.
A lot of universities are also funded by Qatar, by the way. Also, can you go on question time, please? Because our voice is so weak. Last week, I literally gasped when the man said about Hamas that we were trying to have the final solution, and she was very weak, Maria, whatever. We need a voice of strength. Yeah, and also maybe someone who isn't Jewish, that voice of strength. Number 3 is the priority is the kidnapped. And we need more people behind us, non-Jewish. We can't forget them. That is the priority, to get them back. And we can't lose this. And we're going on all these rallies. Tomorrow I'm going on one. But we need more help. We need more bodies. We need other institutions, churches. We need a rallying cry that, you know, these are people that mustn't be forgotten. How can you help us?
Well, they do keep asking me on question time, but I've had such terrible experiences in the past. No, I must stiffen my sinews, mustn't I? It's just, you're always there as the kind of freak. I think I did years ago, I did any questions, and I remember it was they just obviously bust in an audience full of Corbynists. And at one point, I just sort of basically shouted and said, "You may not agree with me, but most of the people in this country agree with what I'm saying," which was, you know, but you're right. And I think there are people, Douglas Murray does a brilliant job. You know, there are very, 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 very good people. I've been thinking I should probably, you're right. I must now, I'll reach out to them and say I'm going to come on.
Yay!
Excellent. Helen Stengel and then Mary Kelsey.
Hang on, but saying about, yes, you're right.
I'm sorry, Alison, carry on.
You know, just what you were saying about not forgetting the hostages, and I think that's very powerful anyway, because everyone can see that is, you know, whatever your other views, everyone can see that that's a disgusting, it's a war crime. So whenever they point out whatever else Israel's doing, you think, yeah, where are the missing 240 people? I've been talking to the embassy. They don't even know quite how many are missing, do they?
I think it's about 240, but no one's too sure.
No one's too sure. And the children, you know, I think everybody can relate to a 10-month-old baby on his own in God knows what circumstances, can't they? You know, so I think that is a very powerful, very, very powerful thing. I don't know if anyone saw, it was the most heartbreaking thing that someone had done a list of the children who'd been killed, and they just had their names and then they had their ages, which was so pitifully small, and then it said, you know, Elor Dada, deceased, and it's just, it was, oh God, it was horrendous. Anyway, but I think hostages is a very good way forward. And by the way, Gary was saying there's going to be possibly some Christian, you know, support.
Yes, on the 19th of November at 4 p.m, the Christian Action Against Anti-Semitism is organising a massive rally for Christians. It will be in central London. We will be publicising it as well, although it's fundamental for Christians to go to. And it will demonstrate, I hope, that the Jewish community do have plenty of support from the Christian community in the UK.
I have to say, I think we had a few vicars and things signing the declaration, but no one high up. So I think a lot of the church is, I don't know. But anyway, that's a bit bummer. Can anyone let me know? Gary will share my email. Any event that's coming up, let me know, and then we can email it out to the.
Of course, I'll certainly give you all the details of the Christian event.
Yeah.
Helen Stengel, then Mary Kelsey. Helen.
Hi. Yes. Yeah, I just wondered if you had any tips or advice about approaching people who are very rampantly anti-Israel. And I mean, my normal instinct is really to avoid them and avoid arguing with such people, because I feel I'm not going to make much headway. But I'm talking to my MP, who happens to be one of them, and, you know, realizing that it's really important to be lobbying one's MP. I'm kind of finding it hard to find the words, to be honest.
Yeah.
In the current situation.
It is very, very difficult, isn't it? I mean, what are the roots of their anti-Israel thing?
Oh, well, it's Islamic. I mean, pretty much, and Corbynite Labour Party sort of think. So that's mainly it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're most of them are beyond the pale, aren't they? Aren't they really? I mean, it's I don't know. These are they're so embedded. I don't know if you felt this. It feels like trench warfare, doesn't it? Really. I mean, you wish there was a middle point, but there doesn't seem to be. I mean, I don't always look below the line on social media. I mean, my comments under the Telegraph ones are very, very, very supportive of Israel. But when I look below the line on Twitter or whatever, and it's just, oh God, I mean, it's incredible. Basically, you know, apparently I'm being paid by Israel. If only.
If only.
The checks in the post, Gary, I presume, is it? Get called, so, you know, there's no reasoning with them. There's no reasoning with them. I don't know what to say, really. I think sending a letter, I think, you know, writing an email and saying, you know, this is the position. You can always read my columns for some ammunition.
Thank you.
Or you could say, you know, and I understand we may differ on this, but I just want you to know that this is the number of children that are being held by Hamas, which is a war crime. So you can actually say very clearly that these are war crimes, you know.
Okay, thank you. Mary, Kelsey, and then Benjamin Black will be next. Mary.
Yes, thank you, Alison, for all you're doing. I've got a different kind of question. How can we challenge the political view about the two-state solution on occupied territories? You're probably aware of Hugh Kitson's work on all the films he's made with international lawyers on whose does the land belong to, and I'm wondering how we can challenge the politicians really on this, because it's just taken up by the media and it's a false claim, because we know jolly well that even if Hamas is eradicated, the Palestinian people will want to wipe the Jews off the land, won't they? And it just doesn't work.
Well, will they? When I interviewed the ambassador last week, she was talking about a Marshall Plan for Gaza, which I thought was very interesting. You know, that she was talking about Japan after the war. She was talking about Germany after the war, about how a huge amount of money was flooded in for education. She was particularly eloquent on needing to get children young to stop them being, you know, taught this just hate from the cradle, really. But I don't know. I mean, look, I just don't understand. To be honest, I don't understand enough about the two-state solution. I mean, there has to be found some way of coexistence. And I think that the only way there will be any prospect of coexistence is once Hamas is so disabled that they can't, they're no longer capable of carrying out those kinds of attacks. My strong sense is what they will do is once they've destroyed as many of them as they can and destroyed the tunnels, that they will create a huge slab of land between them and Gaza will be on its own. I think that they will make a no-go zone, really firm no-go zone that no one will ever be able to cross. What do you think, Gary? Is that what you think they're going to do?
Well, that's a very big subject. It would take me 10 minutes or more to give you my view. If I move on now to Benjamin Black and then Dr. Irene Lancaster. And Irene, if you could put your camera on, that really would be nice. Benjamin.
Hi, Alison. Thank you so much again. I just was amazed when I saw what you've done. And I do agree. I think most of the people marching on the streets are the same people that most of the country told to march on in 2019 at the election, but they just didn't listen. And that fills me with a bit of confidence in the general public. But I saw a video yesterday put out by the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. And it was British soldiers on the streets of London in uniform waving a British flag. And the Met Police told them, sorry, put it away. And they said, why? It's a British flag. surely you can't tell us to put the British flag away. And they said, well, there's more of them than us. It was a Saturday. And that really scared me. And I think my question is, we've talked about getting more people out to demos who aren't Jewish in support of Israel, but what is the Met playing at?
Well, I think that's really gonna kick off soon, because that kind of thing, we're seeing a much more robust response in other capitals, aren't we? I think France has banned the marches. My strong sense is we'll be moving towards banning the marches soon. I just think that Sir Mark Rowley in the Met's position is so compromised. You cannot have a situation. I saw that instance where the police officer said there are more of them than us, which, as you say, is absolutely chilling. And I saw another incident where one of the guys had got onto, I think it was the Boudica statue, and was letting off a red flare. And then he came down, and the police officer said, basically, if I hear you say anything racist or anti-Semitic, and everyone in the crowd around him said to the police officer, yeah, you'll do what? And it was like oh my God.
Gosh. Thank you.
So defiant, so couldn't care less. They think they are impervious. You know, they think they're unchallengeable. So I think that's going to come to a head. And what a friend of mine down in Surrey, she said her 19-year-old son had said he and his mates were going to travel up to London to defend our country. This is where we're heading. This is where we're heading. Not just Jews versus Hamas. We are heading towards British people thinking, who the hell do these people think they are? You know,
Exactly.
dominating the streets, polluting.
Really hope so.
Intimidating elderly poppy sellers. There's going to be a lot of veterans in London on Saturday. We're going to have the most patriotic people in the country on the same streets as the least patriotic people in the country. That's what it's going to come down to. Do you like this country? You're lucky to live here. That's what most people think. Most British people think they're lucky to be here, fit in, make a contribution. If these people are kicking off and dominating in a really unpleasant and ugly, I mean, I saw a placard carried by this young English woman, white woman, a girl, with a bin with the Israeli flag in the bin, and a Jew with "Dirty Jew" written on. You can't have that happening. You can't. Those people must be arrested. You know, and I think that sense will grow. I really think it will grow. Okay. And I have to rely on the decency and common sense of most people.
We've got 10 minutes left. I'm going to try and get as many of the questions in as I can. Dr. Irene Lancaster, followed by Linda Kelly.
Hello, Alison, it's very nice of you to see you after I've been posting so much on the wonderful Telegraph, which someone got me a subscription for. I have signed your declaration. I have sent it to other people to sign, and I'm a retired university lecturer in Jewish history, Hebrew, and I'm working with Oxford University at the moment with these students.
Can we have a question, please?
Yes, I'm just giving a background.
Irene saying, Gary.
Yes, what I wanted to say was, especially to the doctor who was on this, because I write for a website called Christian Today on Jewish matters, which I send to Gary. I do want your email, Alison, if you don't mind giving it me. I dealt with Tara when she did an article about me and all my family that's in Israel, which is why I had to leave this for a minute. The doctor is absolutely correct, but this has been going on, and this intimidation has been going on for 25 years. It has now come to a head. Corbyn, in my opinion, was just the last straw. I'm from Manchester, so I know Burnley very well. Yep. And I can't understand why there were 11 councillors that were all Muslim on that council. And I want to ask you, Alison, and I've got to ask a question. Do you think that people are so scared, including the police, who don't do anything in Manchester either? Do you think that Islam has become, they're so scared of seeming racist against people who look very different that they are just giving in? Because there are cases, as the gentleman before me said, of people just doing normal things that are being told not to do it anymore. And if so, this is very worrying, but it's not new, Alison. It's been going on in the NHS.
Okay, I think we've got a question.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Alison.
Well, we know, don't we, going back to the grooming gangs, which I wrote about all those years ago, people drew attention to, that the Louise Casey report into the grooming gangs basically said that the police didn't want to take any action because of exacerbating community tensions. And we've seen that same language used in the past 2 weeks, and I'm thinking there's only one community's tensions they seem to be worried about. They're not worried about our community tensions, which are growing, or your community tensions were growing. They're worried about the Muslims. And that seems to me to be completely unbalanced and wrong. But there is a fear. And of course, we're in irony of ironies. We're in Islamophobia Awareness Month. And I think many of us might think a phobia about Islam would be completely justifiable at the moment, to be honest. So a phobia is an irrational fear. Some of us think it's a rational fear, about what these people are doing. Yeah, I think there's a lot, Irene, I think there's a lot of pussyfooting around. And I think a lot of these police have probably been on diversity training, and they're probably told, don't challenge them. When they shout jihad, that probably means the nice version of jihad rather than the holy war version. So yeah, I think a lot of our institutions are badly compromised. An extreme nervousness about something kicking off, because they, those big marches, could they contain them? If people started really, rioting, what would happen? I personally think we should call out the army. I mean, I really do think that now. I think we absolutely have to meet antisocial, hateful behaviour with the full force of the law. And if the police can't do it, the soldiers will.
Thank you. Linda Kelly, and then Jeremy L. Linda, you need to come off mute. You're still, there you go.
Hi, Alison. I signed your declaration in my capacity of past civic mayor of Hackney, so I hope you've got it.
Yes.
My question is, because I was in public life for a long time, is that would you consider writing an article and asking the question why, when so many MPs in Parliament take the King's shilling and are elected to represent their constituents, why they are so fascinated with Israel and the Muslim cause than actually working for the constituents that elected them? I'm just wondering whether you would think of writing an article to that effect.
Do you mean specifically certain constituencies where that's not going on? I mean, that obviously is going on in some constituencies.
For example, Corbyn, right, who I think is a devil's spawn. If you look at his work, the questions that he asked in Parliament, 90% of them was to do with what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Dublin and things like that. The rest of it was to do with the cost of, what's happening in his own constituency. So what I'm asking is that maybe do some research and look at the 80 of them that are now rebelling against Starmer. Not that he's my best friend, but now that they're rebelling against Starmer and saying, you are paid to represent your constituents. Your constituents are not just Muslims, and they have more concerns than just what's happening in Palestine, the cost of living, grooming, domestic abuse. What are you doing about that? You can look at the questions that they ask in Parliament and just see how much is it related to a constituency than it's related to being abroad. That's sort of, because when I was a councillor, I had to declare everything. So
okay,
everything was noted.
Could you let Alison answer now,
Yeah.
please?
No, I think that's a very good point, and something I certainly will go and look at. I mean, we've got these, haven't we? I mean, I think that the Labour front bench, I'm sure they will be elected in autumn next year, but I think that the people on the front bench are fairly good and solid, most of them. I think behind Starmer are a lot of very, very worrying people like Naz Shah and those people. We were talking about it earlier, weren't we, Gary? There's this struggle really within the Labour Party. Will Starmer hold firm and defy?
Yeah.
I hope he will. I think he will, because I think he realizes if he capitulates to them. But there aren't. I don't know. There aren't any of those on the Tory side, are there? I don't think.
Not really any left.
Starmer's just a front.
Okay, if we can now move on. Thank you so much, Linda. Jeremy L. and then Michael Shulman. Jeremy.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, Alison. Just a quick one. I'm just asking this because you're a national level journalist on a national paper. And when you meet your colleagues of the same level, BBC broadcasters, correspondents at drinks parties or socially around London, on the circuit of high level broadcasters, do they really believe that they are putting out stuff that's impartial? Or, you know, when the mic's off, when the camera's off, they're talking to you over a drink, do they say, oh, we know, you know, this is all we know it's not impartial? I mean, from the stuff I've heard, it's so blatantly impartial that how can anybody intelligent think otherwise? So that's my question.
Well, I think you overestimate my presence on the drink circuit. I don't tend to meet them. I was involved in a correspondence with one of the presenters on the Today program, and I talked about the not using terrorists for Hamas, and this particular presenter said a couple of them had been they'd been saying amongst, not just amongst themselves, but had been making representation. Oh, I know what it was. It was the hospital bombing. When, I don't know if you had been watching that, but the night that the Israel had allegedly bombed the hospital, I was watching Newsnight, and the journalist, I've never seen anything like it, was totally unprofessional. He basically reported that 500 people were dead. Well, it had only just happened, so how had anybody come up with that number? And then he said, you know, obviously this is Israeli, and he said something like pictures don't lie or something, and you thought, well, but this Today Show presenter said that there had been a great deal of disquiet amongst the senior presenters at this clear, unprofessional, to say the least, and biased reporting. In fact, it's interesting, I didn't know, but Nick Robinson's grandparents or great grandparents were German Jews. So there are people who I think are aware, yes, probably, but it's a very uncomfortable situation.
Alison, have you got 10 more minutes? Are you happy to give us?
Oh, it's interesting that over the weekend, these apparently, Jeremy, these apparently peaceable marches, there were lots of very ugly incidents over the weekend, and someone pointed out that none of them had made it onto the BBC News website. None of them. None of this horrible fighting with the police. I mean, there were people really, you know, rolling around in the streets, and none of that was on the BBC News website. So I think you just keep pointing it out, you know. Gary, in your situation, you could write to Tim Davie and say,
yes,
presenting your assembly.
Certainly, this is something that we're looking at, absolutely.
I think just because actually, even though they'll probably bat you away, it does matter.
It adds to the pressure.
Yeah, you could write to Michael Grade at Ofcom and say, are you noticing that they're not broadcasting any of the you know, just make a bit of a fuss, you know.
Alison, as I see there's 4 or 5 more questions, are you happy to carry on till 8:30?
Yes, why not? Let's, you know.
Why not? Great. Michael Shulman and then Sarah. And Sarah, if possible, could you put your camera on, please? Michael.
Thank you, Gary, and thanks, Alison. Thank you, by the way, for mentioning Douglas Murray, our great supporter, who actually was on television last night, pointing out that Islam as a religion hates Jews. But I'll leave that on one side. The questions I want to ask you are twofold. One, Hamas and their sponsors, Iran, and Hamas in particular, make the statement all the time that they are committed to killing Jews in Israel and all over the world. But I notice the media don't actually continue the actual statement, which I think I would ask you whether don't you think this is just as important. They go on to say that once they've killed the Jews, they're going to kill all the Christians and all the other infidels in the world. I believe that making that statement in full would certainly make a big difference to the way some people, or a lot of people in this country, think about what Hamas really stands for. And the other question is, Boris Johnson has been in Israel looking at the pictures of the terrible atrocities. I personally think that a picture says more than 1,000 words. And I think that these pictures, unpleasant as they may be, I think these pictures should be shown to the public so they actually do understand what has actually happened in Israel, because I think a lot of people just don't really understand.
Alison.
No, I think they're two very good points. I did on Twitter the other day say after the Hamas leader, I can't remember which one it was, basically said, well, we want to do 1 million 7th of October. So at least he was clear. And I said, oh, I said on Twitter, at least it's clear that after they've got rid of the Jews, they'll be coming for the Christians, and then they'll be coming for the gays, and then they'll be, you know, and then it'll be the rest of us. So I did say that, but I think that's a very good point, and I think I will put that in the column. I think we can't ram home enough that this is not just a sort of Jewish problem. These people hate the Western way of life. They hate freedom, and they hate female equality, and so on. So with the what did you just remind me again? The second part of the question was just quickly.
Yeah, the second point was as a saying that one picture says more than 1,000 words, and I believe that the impact of what the terrible things that happened in the kibbutz and in Israel just a couple of weeks ago would be far more effective to the general public if they were actually shown some of these pictures, as Boris Johnson was actually shown only a couple of days ago.
Boris was actually walking around a kibbutz, wasn't he, seeing
Yes.
the sort of bloodstains. I think that, I mean, the Telegraph about a couple of weeks ago did run a picture of one of the murdered babies. I mean, inside it had a big, I don't know if everyone saw it, it had a big warning on the front, because obviously they've got to be quite careful about what they show, but they did show a very distressing picture. I absolutely agree with you. I think that last week the embassy in London showed some of the footage from the body cam, the Hamas body cam stuff to selected journalists, and obviously it's too horrible to see. I think talking to people who'd seen it, I'm sure like me, I've seen a couple of things I can't even, you know, they're beyond any kind of human comprehension. I think that's right. I suppose there's a line, isn't there, between you show yeah, I would be inclined to. I saw a video on Twitter of the aftermath of the festival, which is just bodies, a bar, an open air bar area, just piled with young people's bodies. I mean, it's absolutely incredible. I don't know what everyone else thinks. The newspapers will be worried about taste and decency. You know, that's the problem as well. You know,
I think we've gone beyond that, frankly. I think it's gone beyond that now.
Yeah.
Personally.
Fair enough.
Okay, Sarah, and then Ruth Hart. Sarah.
All right. Hello, Alison. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I think it's incredible. Very grateful. I have, first of all, I was wondering, to try and win the propaganda war. Anyway, it relates a little bit to what Michael has just said. To try and win the propaganda war, would it help, do you think, to keep pointing out the wider picture, as Michael has mentioned? In other words, not just what Hamas want to do in the end, but the involvement of Iran, and even, I understand, Russia behind this massacre, just to give a bigger picture of the threat from these two entities, and who in their right mind would want to give more power to Hamas, Iran and Russia, were Israel to be significantly weakened or destroyed, because then they would come into that area and be in our faces. And then secondly, what about pointing out repeatedly to the anti-colonialist people that they say Israel is a colonialist project? What about pointing out that there's actually a really long history of Arab and Muslim colonialism as well, and why don't they get angry about that? You know, there's been loads of Islamic conquests over the centuries on a very huge scale. So that's my.
Yeah, I think a lot of the geopolitics is lost on people, because, you know, it's quite hard for people to understand that, you know, maybe Russia's involved, Russia's paying some people to go and take down the posters and so on. I certainly think that I did a tweet which was I said that I think it was Tom Lehrer who said that satire died the day that they gave Henry Kissinger the Nobel Peace Prize. And I said that because last week, I'm sure you guys know, that the UN made Iran the chair of the Human Rights Forum. And that's so I think quite a helpful thing, certainly, that I will be doing, is drawing attention to the fact that from Iran, which brings you killing young women for wanting to take their headscarves off, is they're behind these Hamas people. So I think it's just a very good idea to ram home that Israel is one of the only truly democratic countries in the region. It has, human rights, women and gay people are treated equally, and so on. So it's a liberal bastion in an area where that doesn't pertain.
But for all its imperfections, as well.
Well, we've got imperfections, haven't we?
Yeah, exactly.
We're not perfect, and we're not surrounded by. I mean, I said to Gary earlier, I think that that people here, friends of mine who say, why can't they just have a ceasefire? And I'm saying, well, if people living on the Isle of Wight were coming across and butchering vast numbers of British people and causing absolute, barbarity and mayhem, British people would want something to be done, By the way, it's interesting. I think people may have seen that Bernie Sanders in the States, who's as left as the Americans get, Sanders said something yesterday when he was asked about a ceasefire, and he said, you can't have a ceasefire with people whose job description is creating mayhem and murder. So that was very interesting, because he's on the left.
Far left, that's right.
Far left, yeah.
And also,
No, sorry, I've got to we've got very little time left, so I want to bring the final 3 questioners in. Ruth Hart, then Martin Cohen, then Eve Safati. Okay, Ruth.
Good evening, Alison. You mentioned the Armistice Day march. Now, the following Sunday, many Jews will be remembering, those who among the Jewish community who gave their lives. Can we count on the outrage of the decent British public to defend us then?
What do you mean? I mean, what do you mean in terms of when?
Well, there's going to be at lunchtime on the Sunday 19th of November, there's the Ajax Parade, which is the Association of Jewish Ex-Servicemen. They have a parade at the Cenotaph. I mentioned the Christian event, but that's not till much later in the afternoon.
I didn't know that. That's very interesting.
So people can go to both events, actually.
Yes. Yeah, that's very interesting. Presumably the police are tipped off, are they?
Oh, yes.
We
don't
know.
Good Lord, yes. Ajax Parade happens every year.
I'm quite concerned about who gives these permissions, because about 2 weeks ago, next to the Cenotaph, the marchers or whoever had erected a stage with a kind of canopy next to the Cenotaph. I've never seen that, and that caused huge outrage, that they should be in that proximity to that. So I think that Sadiq Khan, you worry, are they waving through this permission? But yeah, certainly. I mean, I'd really like to have details of all these different,
We'll ensure you get them.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Martin Cohen and finally Eve Safati. Martin.
Thank you, Gary. Good evening, Alison. 2 very short questions. I'll keep it very short. You mentioned the term contribution. Would it be possible for the Telegraph to actually list all the prominent Jews in this country, what we have contributed to the benefit of this country? I've noticed on Wikipedia, for example, a whole list of every sort of work available, whether it's been doctors, actors, professions, whatever. Would it be possible just to let people in this country know just what we have contributed to the UK? The one for the US is even bigger still. The second question, if I may, and then I'm finished. Would it be possible for the Daily Telegraph to actually portray what the various charters from Hamas, from the PLO, aka the Palestine Authority, just what their aims are? Because it's so clear exactly what they want to do. And perhaps you may have people there at the Telegraph can actually go through these and explain exactly what's meant by them. Thank you. I'm keeping it short.
I think they're two very good suggestions. And I think probably that people have said, what a brilliant example of integration British Jews are. But I think that's not, it's a good suggestion to point out the contribution in all walks of life. I think that's a really good idea. And I think we have had some explanation about the Hamas charter, but again, I think it would be good. as the previous speaker said, to point out that they're not just about murdering Jews. I mean, they've got a long list of people they plan on eliminating, haven't they?
Thank you. Eve Safati, you got the last question. Hello, Eve Safati? Hello, I think you've frozen. Hello, last chance. That's better.
Hello.
Hi.
No, listen, I'm a French Jew who moved to London about 25 years ago. I've raised 3 kids here. The truth is, I ran away from anti-Semitism 25 years ago, and I end up seeing the UK catching up massively with true anti-Semitism. My first question would be, do you feel that Britain is sick with anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism? What is your real view? Because I obviously don't have much outside.
Your connection's a bit weak.
The second question would be, don't you think would you think that your influence would be better to focus on everything but the conflict? As for instance, we see the northern countries applying new regulation to try to take immigration, this type of immigration away, the kids and everything. They know they're too generous.
Okay. We're running out of time now. Alison, would you like to try and answer the question? Alison.
Well, Eve, I'm sorry that you've come from France and come here and found it's caught up.
Okay, I had 25 very good years. I can move on. So, but it's going to be sad for the UK. I can feel it.
I still think that the anti-Semitism is more ingrained in France than it is here. I don't think it's ever had a very powerful hold here, and I still think it's more worrying among the young here because they've gone through the university system, and I think it is in the liberal intelligentsia to a worrying degree. But I don't think anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism is widespread in the country as a whole. I really don't think that. I don't think most people would register it at all, would be rather surprised about it. And as to your second point, I really feel and have felt for some time that the illegal migrant situation, when we are allowing thousands of people, undocumented, mainly young men from the Middle East and North Africa, to come into our country at a time when there must be a heightened terrorism risk, is absolutely lunatic. And I have been noticing, I mean, Germany in the Bild newspaper had a really very strong statement about, if you come here, this is how you behave, or you can go. And I would predict that we will be moving more towards that course. I really think we will. I think the public is far more concerned about these things than the political classes. There's a huge gap between the public, who are seeing this threat now from Muslim arrivals, or particularly the radicalized element. And you may have noticed, Steve, that something that always, I shouldn't say makes me laugh because it's very bad, but you'll notice that statements from the counter-terrorism groups always balance the Islamist extremist threat with the far right. Trust me, the threat from the far right is absolutely tiny. So they are really frightened. I think they are frightened of what they've created. I think they have a ticking time bomb in our country. They have allowed ghettos to develop around the country, and there has not been integration, and this is a huge problem. And just to finish, many years ago, I volunteered teaching English in Tower Hamlets to women and children who were from Bangladeshi and Pakistani families. I got on very well with them, but I realized the men were never going to let them integrate. Never, never. And that for me is the root of the problem, the absolute root of the problem. There has not been proper integration because too many of those women and children are controlled by men with a medieval mindset. If that's not too large a thought, but it's a huge problem going forward. What can we do about it? I don't know. What does anyone think? Repatriation.
Huge question. In a moment, I'm going to ask Steve Winston, our Managing Director, to propose those thanks. But first, I want to remind everybody that our next meeting is on Thursday night, where we're going to have a discussion about the future of Gaza after the war is over. That discussion is going to be led by probably the most brilliant young lawyer in Britain today, a lady called Natasha Hausdorff, who has been prominent in defending Israel during the course of the war. She's certainly someone to be watched, who will do exceptionally well in law and in politics in the years to come. And she's leading the discussion.
I've seen her. She's absolutely brilliant. She's like a dragon. She lays waste to them. Before we finish, I am Allison, ALLISON, at AllisonPearson.net. Allison at AllisonPearson.net. So do email me, and particularly loop me into any vigils, or so we can then start getting that stuff out to all of our signatories. And also, if you haven't signed, or if you know people who haven't signed the October Declaration, please get them to sign, because it's very important. And once we hit 100,000, we can hopefully get onto some more news shows and things.
Alison, thank you so much. And Natasha will be leading the discussion on Thursday night with speakers from Israel, who will also give their views, and you'll get the chance to give your views on what should happen to Gaza after the war. Steve, over to you.
Thank you, Gary. And thank you, Alison. We've had a fantastic attendance here this evening, and that's all due to you. I recall that, as you know, the 7th of October was the darkest day in the Jewish people's history since the Holocaust. And as you also said earlier, the sympathy for Israel was there. It was outpouring, but it was limited in terms of how long it went on for. And we all knew that the tide would turn. And pretty soon we saw a group called Artists for Palestine with an open letter, basically decrying Israel's retaliatory operation, describing it as war crimes and all sorts. And then we had the October Declaration came from a group called British Friends of Israel. And, I can honestly say that as a Jewish person and someone who's working within the wider Jewish community, it was really sincerely appreciated. The wording in there was an overwhelming show of much needed support and solidarity. So, from all of us in the UK and, the Jewish community across the world, thank you. Thank you to you and your colleagues who put all of this together. The situation is bad. Like you say, there have been worse times. But just before I was given over from Gary, my son sent me a screenshot of a pizzeria in Leeds who are promoting an anti-Zionism pizza and refusing to serve Zionists. And it's just how deep the hatred is going. So needless to say, we won't be having pizza from there. But really, on behalf of us, the National Jewish Assembly, when we saw the declaration, when we saw it started to filter out there into the public sphere, I said to my colleague Dalia, and she probably said it to me first, actually, we've got to try and get hold of Allison Pearson to speak to us, because this is just the most fantastic endeavour. So really, excuse me, thank you very much. Honestly, that's a very sincere thank you. It's a very big thank you. It's not said lightly. and you know, we look forward to seeing more of your wonderful Twitter feed. It comes up on my phone and my screen throughout the day, and I instantly stop what I'm doing and go over to your tweets, which are absolutely amazing. So thank you for everything you do and for your support. It's really is a beacon of light in quite a dark time for us all.
Well, thank you so much. I will pass on everyone's thanks to the gang, and we will be, you know, we're up for anything. We'll be dragged along to make speeches. As long as I can be, what am I? I'm a mensch, and I am righteous amongst whoever I am. That's good.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we look
forward to working with you going forward.
Let's go and have some rooftop cocktails in Tel Aviv when the whole damn thing's over, eh?
Absolutely.
Great idea. Thank you ever so much, Alison. Thank you.
Could
Thank
you look at my 2 points on the chat line? Could you look at those, Alison? Doesn't have to be now, but if you
yeah,
could.
I've noted them for Alison. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thanks everyone, and see you all on Thursday night, I hope.
Yes.
Okay. Bye. Great, Alison. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.